Hey guys, this is Joe with GotBaseballCards.com coming to you live from our retail store in Loganville, Georgia. Today with the second episode of Profiles in Collecting. I'm here today with longtime friend Jess Smith, who has been a hobby veteran as long as I've known him. When I first started attending shows in the late 80s, he was one of the vendors, one of the show dealers I would always shop with and do business with. And so I've asked him to come in today to share a little bit about the backstory of the hobby back in the 80s. And 80s, early 90s, and he's still heavily involved in the hobby today. We were just checking out some graded singles we have here in the store. And so just tell me, how did you get, I guess you started off as a collector?
Yeah, I did. I collected like most people did as a kid. And then when I got to be closer to around 16 years old, I discovered interest in cars and other things than baseball cards. So I kind of lost interest for probably 10 years, and then back in the late 80s, believe it or not, I had taken a weekend trip down to the beach, and on the way home on Sunday afternoon, we stopped at the Quick Mart to pick us up a Coke, and I happened to see, as I was buying my Coke, a pack of cards, which I hadn't seen in about 10 years. I bought a couple of packs, and one thing led to another, and here I am almost 40 years later, heavily involved.
So what was that, like 76, 77?
No, that was been 81. I remember
okay.
it was 81 Donruss that I
Okay.
bought, and then I discovered a little bit later, of course, the Tops and the Fleer, and then the Upper Deck in the late 80s, and all the other up and comers since then.
All right. Well, I remember when I was in college at Berry College. I still remember this. My old partner Jeff Porter came into my dorm room one night. He had been to an Atlanta show, and he goes, "Man, I met the coolest guy today. His name's Jess from Tennessee, and he's got these cool holders, and you were well known for the white border holders. Remember those things?"
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And we thought they were the coolest because they just made the cards look so much better than top loads. And I remember back then you always had like the nicest selection of high grade singles. And back then there was no PSA, there was no Beckett, but I remember you specialized in high grade vintage. So why was that one of the things you always liked to pursue back then?
I think it was just, everybody had to try to find their niche, and I just had a larger appreciation for the nicer collectibles. Obviously, the nicer they were, the more money they were valued at, and I always felt like, although this was before grading, and I would say in 10 years, I could never recall an incident where myself and the potential buyer could not agree on the grade of a card. I mean, it was always pretty easy for us to decide how a card should grade, and we didn't feel like we needed to pay anybody to give us that information, although now it's become a super big business. Right. And everybody realizes the importance of getting cards graded, but back in the old days, it was just you and I sitting down and trying to figure out the grade ourselves.
I well remember, you've always heard the fisherman stories about the one that got away. You may not remember this, but I remember in the late 80s, I went to a yard sale, bought the nicest 68 Nolan Ryan rookie I'd ever seen, perfectly centered, sharp corners, and I brought it to the show and sold it to you. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't.
But I know many transactions ago, but and I've got a pretty nice Nolan sitting right here. This is a PSA 6. But I swear that one would have been a 9 or a 10 because it was just gorgeous, and I made money on it, you made money on it, and of course you saw a 10 just sold for $600,000.
Exactly.
So as we said, that's the one that got away. I probably both of us should have held on to that.
Yeah,
one.
I wish I had a little bit more foresight to just put back, just a handful of the nicest cards that I've owned at one time or another. But I always tried to operate under the rules of don't fall in love with your inventory. Yeah. So whatever I bought, I would try to sell, make a little profit on, and move on to the next deal.
Now, did you buy and sell any wax back then, or was it?
Yeah, I did. I did wax. As a matter of fact, I did vending cases. They had 24 vending boxes in a case back in those days. There would be 500 randomly inserted cards in a vending box, and there was another dealer that if you sorted 3 cases of vending cards for him, he would give you 1 case free. So I can remember in the 80s sorting, let's see, that would have been 36,000 Topps cards to get one case of 12,000 free, and it would take me about 20 hours to sort through one case of 24,000 cards. But in those days, you only had Topps, Donruss, Fleer. You only had one release a year, so those cards maintained their value throughout the whole year. So it was definitely a different time.
Now, when did you start doing shows, roughly? Like mid-'80s, late 80s?
The first shows that I started doing, I would say, were probably around 87, 88. I started going to the Nationals. I did the Nationals for about 10 years, and when I was doing shows in those days, I was selling wax, selling singles, just whatever, selling a little bit of memorabilia, just whatever I took an interest in.
Right. What do you recall as probably your best purchase back in the day?
Well, you talk about the one that got away. Probably my most valuable purchase that I ever had, and I kept it maybe for a year or so. I made real good money on it, but what it is worth today and what I sold it for those days is no comparison. But it would have to be a 1960 Mickey Mantle away jersey, game used away jersey. Wow. That I was extremely excited to buy it. I kept it for about a year. I had a guy who wanted to trade me a lot of stuff for it. I ended up making the trade. Like I said, I made good money, but I sure would love to still possess that today.
Yeah. What do you think market on something like that is today?
Oh, Joe, I really don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say ballpark maybe $500,000.
Wow. Yeah, Mantle game-worn jerseys are few and far between and very sought after. Well, as you've still been heavily involved in the hobby, working with different shops, and Jess is a great works with a leading distributor and travels around helping supply stores in the Atlanta area. And what have been some of the biggest changes you think you've seen, let's say, over the last 10 years?
The biggest changes over the last 10 years would probably be the advent of online buying and selling. Yeah. I mean, it used to be the only way that you could buy cards or sell cards would be to go to the store or go to the local or national shows. But with the advent of eBay and DealerNet, which I know was longer than 10 years ago, but those two avenues of buying and selling cards probably has been the biggest change in, say, the last 10 to 15 years that I have seen.
And what have you seen changes since? I know you've worked with a number of shops over the years. Obviously, we've seen a large drop-off in total number of shops in the last, I know since I've been in business since '91, we seem to have them on every corner, and now there's only a handful here in the Atlanta area. What do you think you attribute that to? Do you think it's more people doing everything online?
Yeah, I think it's that. I think there has been probably in the last 20 years, there has been mass production of cards, which has allowed the value of cards not to increase as rapidly as a lot of the people that are buying them would like. I think not only is it a big industry for collectors, it's also a big industry for investors.
Right.
And I think investors have discovered that it is a lot harder to make money in this industry as it was 20, 25 years ago, so therefore a lot of them have moved on to other collectibles.
All right, yeah, we've definitely seen some dramatic changes. There are areas that are red hot, and there's others that are not the same as they used to be.
It's still possible to make money in the industry, but like I said, I think you've got to be a lot more astute, and you've got to be smart, and you've got to be up to date on everything.
What words of advice would you give to new collectors who are just getting into the hobby?
I would say be sure and find a guy that has been in the industry a long time, that you can trust, that you feel real good working with, a guy like yourself, and try to just be a sponge and talk to this mentor or this person and just learn as much as you possibly can about the industry. Read articles, buy your local, your monthly guides. There's always, not only does it give you the idea of what cards are valued, but there's also good articles in there about the industry. So that would be my advice as far as a new collector. Plus, I would say don't don't get into it expecting to make money. Get into it just to have fun and enjoy the collecting and opening a pack and getting your favorite player out of that pack. There's, there's still some kind of joy in that. It may not be monetary joy, but it's definitely a emotional joy that is a lot of fun opening a pack and seeing a picture of your favorite player in it.
Exactly. It's where it all started for all of us as kids. I remember that and the chewing gum. That was back in the day. I had to have the gum. So.
Exactly.
All right. Well, guys, we greatly appreciate you tuning in. Jess, thanks so much for coming out today and sharing with us and good words of insight. And anything else you want to share?
No, I just wanted to say thanks for having me, and good luck in the future to everyone.
All right. Thanks so much, Jess.
All right.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you next time in Profiles in Collecting.